Hey guys, it's Ethan from Zimmer Labs, and this is a old vintage Ro lightsaber that I just renovated for AJ. This was a lot of fun, and I'm really happy with how it came out. The story behind this is that I would say, this is just my best guess, but I'd say it's about a 10-year-old Graflex that AJ picked up on the internet for a very, very low price because it was old and beat up and not working anymore. Here's what it had inside. It had looks like an RGB LED and a Plector Prism V4 maybe, and then it had this old school Bluetooth. See, this is the Bluetooth chip, and this is a signal booster, and the whole thing was kind of wired together into this sandwich configuration, which was pretty cool and pretty well done, especially given that back in the day, you know, there weren't these awesome little feezy Bluetooth modules, sort of Bluetooth 5.0, that are the size of a, you know, your fingernail. Back in the day, you had to have two different boards to have decent Bluetooth, and this is, I think, Bluetooth 2.0, as opposed to what we're doing these days, which is Bluetooth 5. But anyway, so decent electronics, you know, for the age. Nowadays, these are totally dated, and you know, yes, I'm sure they'll still work, but they don't do all the new effects, and they don't have smooth swing, and a lot of the things that we kind of take for granted these days. But at any rate, so AJ sent me this and asked me if I could kind of bring it back to life, renovate it, but at the same time upgrade it to a Profi board Neopixel saber. But he gave me a very tight budget, so this is a budget Ro lightsaber Profi board Neopixel upgrade. Now, I love these things. These are some of my favorite aesthetics as far as custom lightsaber builds go. I love how Ro does his builds with, you know, all sorts of different funky little ingredients. I mean, nothing here, with the exception of this part right here in the middle, is actually a Shapeways printed part. Everything else is just funky stuff that, you know, pipes and tubes, but then also little just interesting little parts that he pulled out of God only knows what, you know, probably different motors and different electronics, and he just kind of gutted and then reassembled into this funky chassis / crystal chamber design, which is super cool, you know? Like, it's totally unique, it looks great, and it's nice and solid. It's all, you know, it's all brass, and it looks really cool. And, you know, even though it's 10 years old, it still looks really cool. And plus, he actually put a 31 millimeter speaker, sorry guys. And, you know, that's pretty rare. When you see a Graflex, you expect a 28 millimeter speaker on there. Now, the only real downside with this build, the way it initially was that this was really it. There was, you know, your main power switch. It's right there in this little groove that he cut out, and your recharge port is hanging out right here. But that's it. You know, there was about 15 set screws that held this into the upper half of the Graflex. One set screw there, one set screw there, one set screw there. There were like 2 set screws in this circle cutout, 2 set screws over here, 1 set screw right there underneath the slide tab. There was another set screw underneath the bottle top, bottle opener thingy, whatever you want to call it. You know, just basically like bolting this thing together like almost a Frankenstein job. And, you know, while it was good in the sense that it was very secure, you know, this chassis wasn't coming out, it was not so good in the sense that nowadays, when you have a semi-high-end Graflex, you kind of expect and you kind of want the whole thing to be removable. You want the chassis to be modular and, you know, self-contained, where you can take the whole thing out, take the Graflex all the way apart, and, you know, have it really be that detailed. So that was kind of my goal. I wanted to renovate it in a way that allowed for the whole chassis to come out. So this, just to show you guys, this is actually the blade holder that was in there. So this is what you saw from the top. And, you know, it is a good blade holder. It's just that it was hacked off about halfway down. And as you guys can see here, all these holes that are tapped and threaded, there was set screw there, 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 set screw there. And, you know, just like I said, just kind of Frankenstein bolted together. But the idea here was I wanted to renovate and upgrade this without changing it, but at the same time adding to it, because I love how the main power switch is hanging out right here in this cutout, and I love how the recharge port is accessible right here through that cutout. So I didn't want to modify that, but I wanted it to be fully modular, you know, fully removable, and an entire modular unit like this, but at the same time, you know, stay true to its roots. So what I did was basically everything from here up is what I added on, and then I just repaired everything from here down and installed new electronics, new battery, etc., and flipped it over to Neopixels. So we get pogo pin style blade connector in there. This is an MB emitter, the V1, and I did it in plain aluminum and then gave the aluminum an acid wash and a little bit of sanding and polishing to weather it to match, and then attached everything up with some threaded rods and some brass tubes, and then acid etched those to match. And then I housed the Profi board, which is hanging out right here, inside of a steel part that actually kind of just worked out well for this build. This is actually a broken steel part that was for a MK1 that I'm currently building for another customer, and this part had broken when I was sanding and polishing it, because this shapeways steel is very brittle, so it's super easy to break. And I had it on my Fordham, and you know, it just caught it the wrong way and flew across the room and shattered. But you know, I try to save stuff like that because you never know when you'll find a good home for it, and this worked out perfect because I didn't want to just have the Profi board hanging out suspended in this section, you know, just visible and with nothing going on there. But I wanted everything to kind of be contiguous and, you know, from top to bottom aesthetically the same. So I used this part as kind of a Profi board housing. So Profi board's hanging out inside there, and as you can see, obviously I threw a little blue LED in there just to kind of keep the aesthetic flowing from bottom to top, because as you can see, the way Ro built this is just to kind of demolish it with LEDs of every color, and to put them on some sort of random blink pattern. And some of these are even RGB LEDs. As you can see, this one down here is changing colors, blinking, changing colors, etc., etc. But you know, just a lot of funky LEDs going on in the bottom, and one more hanging out at the top. Then I added an auxiliary switch, which is obviously actuated by the slide switch here. Before, there was no auxiliary. There was just your main on button, and the slide tab here was actually locked and blocked because of the set screw that was right there. So I had to actually kind of make the back end of that slide switch so that it would work, and it would actuate the little mechanism here. And then Obviously your main power button's up top. But she's all set up, wired up for Neopixels with smooth swing and a profi board, and you know, all the modern accoutrements that you hope for in a funky Graflex lightsaber. While at the same time, I think we did a good job kind of keeping it true to its original identity and just bringing it back to life, because like I said, it just wasn't working at all when AJ sent it to me. So we'll pop it in. As I said, this is the MB Emitter V1, so that means that the way this works is it comes in two pieces. There's this part, and then there's a small part, kind of like just, you know, this much of this bit that sits on top, which you bolt in and stays mounted inside the top end of the Graflex, where you know, your brass pins are mounted in there permanently, so you don't have to worry about unscrewing those. And if you want to actually go as far as I did with this, you can add the little detail on the slots, like the nickel plated contacts that are in both little windows, which I added onto this, and then I added the flathead screw just to make it screen accurate. But you know, this part right here is part of the MB emitter, and this is my personal favorite Graflex blade holder because A, it looks nice, B, it's a fair price, C, it's functional, it really works well, and D, it gives you this really nice screen accurate but at the same time super user friendly install setup, because you could pull the whole thing out and the only thing that you have to worry about unscrewing is your glass eye. That holds everything in place, and that's just a really good design, you know. And obviously nobody's surprised by that. You know, when Martin does something, especially when it's Graflex related, he does it right. You know, he is the king of Graflexes, and I don't think anyone would dispute that. But so there she is, put back together. Kill switch here, recharge board here. I programmed it so that the funky accent LEDs come on as soon as you power on, but when you turn the blade on, they go off and the crystal chamber comes on, just because otherwise you kind of just wasting, burning up battery, and when the blade's on, most likely you're going to have it bottled up, closed, and using the blade, so you wouldn't see them anyways. But you'd want to have your crystal active with the blades on, just so you can kind of, if you want to display it with the crystal out, you know, you want to have it illuminated, but chances are you're probably not going to display it like that. Blade plug. This was also part of the original, and for this all I had to do was give it a new section of blade tube and a blade connector and some sort of inner mounted pixels here to give this an illuminated blade plug. And you get some nice shine through from that. Nice illumination on the front end, as you can see. So now the auxiliary button is this guy up top. Red button is your main button. This toggles between blade presets. Now, like I said, this is your blade retention. So to take the glass eye off, or at least unscrew it a bit, and then just kind of shake down to get the blade plug to slide out. This is just a shop blade for the sake of demonstration, because AJ already has a Neopixel blade, so we didn't make one for him for this, but hopefully his will work. On the fly color change, because it's awesome. And back to the beginning. So aside from adjusting the sound fonts, everything is pretty much good to go. AJ, I hope you like it. Show off this chassis one more time. Nice crystal reveal. Obviously I did replace the LEDs in that with pixels so that it would be accurate with the rest of the effect. There we go. That's what I was looking for. Before I run afoul of any copyright laws, the only other thing to show you guys is the way that I attached everything up top. I don't think I mentioned that, but threaded rods is obviously the best way to do that kind of thing, because most parts are designed to be mounted that way. Certainly this emitter is. So every one of these little kind of jutting out portions of the emitter is already tapped and threaded down here for a 440 rod. But what made it a little tricky with this guy is the emitter had to line up correctly with the rest of the bottom, because the emitter has to line up with this section of the hilt, and the recharge port has to line up with this. So that meant that I had to line up these holes with the correct portion of this kind of chunk of brass. And since this isn't continuous all the way around, it was just barely doable that I could find 3 areas where I could anchor the threaded rods to this brass piece that actually lined up and actually had the emitter facing in the correct orientation. So that's what we did. I just, drilled and then tapped and threaded this piece here, here, and here, and then cut some brass rods, the appropriate length to cover the threaded rods, and you know, it's nice and stable and sturdy, but that's why it's a little bit wacky with 2 rods here and 1 rod here, nothing on this side, nothing on this side, because it just didn't line up. Like this hole is lined up with this area right here, which is not thick enough to hold a rod. This hole lines up with this area that was already pre-drilled and not drilled in the correct spot, so we couldn't use that. This hole lines up with the recharge port, can't use that. These 2 line up, and we're back to the beginning again. So, like I said, just barely had enough to get 3 rod anchor points, which is really all you need. You can do more if you want, but 3 is sufficient. 3 is typical. 4 is, you know, the most you'll probably ever see. Anything beyond that is just totally overkill, but they're steel rods, so 3 is more than enough. 2 is even enough, but it's not going to be as sturdy. 3 with the triangulation of the legs gives you much more stability, so it doesn't wiggle at all. And that's my geometry lesson for the night. And that is the Ro lightsaber renovated. So AJ, I hope you like it. Thank you guys as always for watching. Stay tuned. Hopefully the next video up will be the all metal MK1 that I'm working on right now. Just a brief tease for you guys. All metal, all around, beautiful. We'll do a full video on that one soon. And you guys have a good rest of your Monday off.